Hey guys, it's your girl Lira, and you're listening to Self-Reflection Podcast. Thank you guys for joining me on another episode of Self-Reflection Podcast. I pray and I hope that this conversation is going to find you in the best possible state that you could be in for yourself in today. And if you're not doing your best, like always, I want to encourage you to create a moment for self-reflection. I will say this time after time on this podcast episode. Self-reflection is something that has helped me personally. It has helped me to be able to find myself a little bit more. It has helped me with my spiritual life. It has allowed me to have more self-confidence with myself. So if you're not doing your best, create a moment for self-reflection. And if you cannot handle the emotions that you are feeling in this moment by yourself, reach out, seek some support, right? We are social beings. We need people. And sometimes the feelings and the emotions that we have in our body, we cannot process it on our own. So we need an external person to be able to maybe just allow us the space to let out our thoughts, our feelings, and emotions, right? Because that is healing itself happening in that space when you are able to express yourself. So again, if you're not feeling your best, reach out, get that support. I'm excited to be in the studio today, guys. Let me just say that. I haven't been in a studio for almost 2 months now or so, something like that, right? It's been a long time since I've been here. So being back in here is my happy place. I would say that every time I come back in this place, in this studio, I feel at home. I feel at peace. I feel like the world doesn't exist. This is literally a place where when I come to, I'm like, oh, yes, I'm finally like just doing something that I love because I literally love doing podcasting. So before we get into our conversation today, I want to ask you if you have yet to subscribe to Self-Reflection Podcast, please go ahead and hit that subscription button as well as we seek to grow this community on here. And also, if you're not following me on my social media, my handle is Lira, Lira_NDIFON. Let's continue to grow, y'all. Let's continue to heal and let's continue to find self-love. Today, we are going to be talking to Justin. Justin is somebody that we have had on Self-Reflection Podcast before. But our topic for today is very specific. We are going to be talking about depression and anxiety. So, Justin, for those that have not listened to our previous conversation, please give us a little background of who you are and maybe a little bio of you.
My name is Justin Witte. I have written 2 books. One is The Shadowed Soul, which is about overcoming mental illness through Jnana Yoga. It's my most recent book. I've rewritten it many times. I'm rewriting it again right now because I keep on developing the ideas. And the other one is A Vicious Cycle, and this is about the way I used to be, the way I'm no longer. And it's a little much for a lot of people, but let's just say it's a true story. I have had kind of a crazy life for most Americans, considering, put into context, for someone in the Gaza Strip, I don't think I've been through much, actually. But, if it comes to people living in America, I've probably been through quite a bit compared to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm someone who struggled with suicidal depression at a very young age. I was abused as a child, and that's something I write about in both books, is my relationship to my father and how I took it out on the world around me. I am someone who has tried killing myself more times than I can count, really. A lot of the times it was just so I wouldn't be homeless. I never had the ability to be homeless in a big city. I mean, I think something most billionaires don't realize is what the most difficult job in America is, probably being homeless in a big city. You close your eyes, everything's gone, and so a lot of the times when I tried to kill myself, it was just for a place to live at General Hospital. But there was times I meant it and it just wouldn't happen. The first time I tried jumping in front of a bus, but I was too drunk to realize I was at the stop sign, and so the bus came screeching to a halt. The cop tackled me and they threw me in Ozanam detox, which is a detox for people who are drug and alcohol abuse. And I am an alcoholic and an addict. And the next day I tried cutting my throat. It was the second time I spent a month in a psych ward. The first time I spent a month in the psych ward was for my 14th birthday in a psych ward. And he was a very abusive man. reconciling that relationship with him as an adult was an amazing thing. And that is something that I talk about in this book specifically, that if you take the power of choice out of anyone's hand, there is no one to regret. There is only one person with the power of choice in my life, and that's me.
Yeah.
And that is just how I live. To me, everything is just cause and effect, causality. I am a determinist who argues from the power of choice, and that's what got me into Hinduism, is that it argues out of paradoxes, which most Western sciences don't acknowledge. Quantum physics can, and some people, doctors in quantum physics say, well, that's just the way the particle behaves, so it's not a paradox. But a wave and a particle, you can't have something that both acts as a continuous wave and an individual particle without it being a paradox. And one of the things I point out with Western science is, in this book specifically, The Shattered Soul, is every time we get an answer in Western science, we just get more questions. We don't get to the end of answers. And that is the paradox of Western science.
Yeah. How many different diagnoses have when it comes down to mental health?
I've been diagnosed with epilepsy. I'm on the autism spectrum. I have ADHD, dyslexia, PTSD and anxiety, suicidal depression, and schizoaffective bipolar type. I've also struggled with brain damage, which through my seizures and drug usage. I'm 19 years sober today, these days. It just happened in April, and I have no desire to use drugs anymore whatsoever. I like thinking clearly, and this book is all about meditation, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy is thinking clearly today.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of diagnosis for one person to have.
I have a rare organic brain disorder that gives me the aspects of all of those without fitting one stereotype.
Yeah, which is what is an organic brain disorder?
There's people who have chemical disorders such as depression, but I have they have lack of serotonin, or people even with bipolar have their chemicals in their brain go up and they go down, they go up and they go down, and that is can be a chemical disorder.
Yeah.
I have congenital defects in my brain. So they see what's called a heterotopic gray matter. It's a nerve that everyone has had from late womb to early childhood development, and they don't know why it's there. It's kind of like an appendix. But bits of mine were left over adjacent to my right lateral ventricle, my right frontal horn. And it's what sends the electronical impulses and speculated to cause the other disorders. They really don't know because there's so much that is unknown about the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also want to just touch on something here. Like, I appreciate you for bringing that part up when it comes on to like mental health illness, because oftentimes we do talk about mental illness in our society thinking that, especially when you look out into the world today and people that have quote unquote made it, people that have finance and stuff like that, they think that some people that struggle with the mental health is them just being lazy. Right. And I want to touch on that because sometimes it's not a person's choice to have that mental health illness, right? There's actually there's a chemical imbalance that is in the brain that's causing that. You seem to
There are
want to
two
add.
things that cause every illness, no matter what it is. And that's genetics and circumstances. And 90% of what everybody learns, even if they're Albert Einstein, happens to the ages of 1 and 5.
Yeah.
There is so much that is programmed into us from a very early age. They know it from studying identical twins that it's both genetics and circumstances, because if one identical twin develops schizophrenia, the other might not. And, your genes mutate as you grow older. Every cell in your body is constantly replaced. And with those replacements comes gene mutation based on circumstances. So you can develop mental illness.
Yeah.
I was born with seizures, and, a seizure is nothing but an electronic surge of energy in the brain. And what the brain functions off of is nothing but electricity. So every time I have a seizure, the chemicals in my brain fluctuate. I still have simple partial and partial complex seizures all the time. If I had one today, I could tell you. I could show you my pupils would fluctuate. They would oscillate. And, but that being said, to me, it's all just cause and effect. As I said, I'm a determinist. I agree with Freud. We're nothing but rational animals that seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Yeah.
And we don't pay attention to 90% of what we think. Descartes says, if you meditate, you can look at your mind from any angle. you'll find both those concepts in some of the most ancient scriptures on the planet, the Vedic scriptures.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I also, just to add, I think science is now showing that we can rewrite our DNA, which it's interesting concept that is out there. But that's another topic for another day. Moving on here, when it comes down to suicide, right? At what age did you first become suicidal?
I was
and depressed in that space, and what brought about your depression?
12 and 13. My dad, like I said, was a very abusive man. I won't get into everything because there's other people in my family that don't really want to hear about it. But he was physically towards me, and he proved to me how stupid I was, basically. I scored in the top 5% in IQ tests they gave me when I was a little kid, but I was terrible at school. I couldn't read, and I couldn't, do school in any way, and that was because my dyslexia and my ADHD was so bad. And he had a PhD in organic chemistry. My dad made drugs and sold it to the Reed College students where he worked. So, he could, organic chemistry, the basic compounds of life and the chemicals that interact with it. And he was extremely abusive in all kinds of ways. And after he left, I called him up and I asked him if there's anything he ever regretted. And he said, yes, I didn't make you work harder because we're in school right now. And I had a nervous breakdown. I was getting violent with my mother. I tried getting a gun from, and then the song actually, Janie's Got a Gun, came out. And it made me just really reflect on that. And that's something that I used up until very recently as just something to keep the world away, was music. And one thing I will talk about today is the issues that youth is having with entertainment and such things as music, and now social media, which I'm grateful I existed the days before the internet as a child, because I can see it causing all kinds of more mental health issues with me than I would have in this modern day. And such things as Facebook or YouTube or the videos of these kids shooting up the schools. One of the things people do when they are depressed is they find comfort in things that make them more depressed. Such songs as I'm a Rock by, Simon and Garfunkel, that was me. I have no need of friendship. Friendship causes pain. It's laughter and it's loving I disdain. I would put on my headphones and just scream as loud as I could as the world was not there. I was blocking out the world. And they sent me to detentionary boarding school after I got out of the psych ward in Discovery Academy in Provo, Utah, and it just made my life a million times worse. A lot of people have reported issues with a lot of those, juvenile halls for rich kids. But that's where my oppositional defiance disorder really took off. And that is part of my autism and my ADHD. I would stand up to any authority figure whatsoever. And it's something I've even had to deal with in my adult life because of my developmental issues with my autism.
I think you just brought up a topic that we're going to dive into here with suicide in America right now. I'm going to read some statistics on here, and I'm hoping that you're going to give us a little bit of your perspective from this. In 2022, men died by suicide 3.85 times more than women. And with that same statistics, with suicide that high and men committing suicide 3 times more than women, white men account for 68.46% of death in 2022. And according to American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, suicide is the 11th leading cause of death in America. 49,476 Americans died by suicide in 2022. 1.6 million were estimated to attempt suicide. Okay, so I would like for you to, the first part, which is men are committing suicide 3 times more than women. What do you think is happening in that space? And this is more general.
What I think is happening in that space is technology and such things as education. Everybody needs an education nowadays. That was not the case back in the 1960s.
Yeah.
You could get a good, decent job and be a productive member of society. That's one of the reasons Donald Trump won the White House, is because he appealed to the plight of the man.
Yeah.
It was there was a huge gender gap, and he won uneducated men by a very large portion. If you saw, and I'll point this out, that during COVID, global depression rates skyrocketed. They were 20%, 25% higher. And one of the things that we're doing these days, even with technology, is isolating more post-COVID. Everybody's staring at their cell phones. They're having job online. They can work remotely from home, and they're just not even going into the office and interacting with people.
Yeah.
COVID didn't affect me that much because this is the most social I've been my whole life. For a big majority of my life, like I said, I just kept my headphones on and stayed away from everyone. I was completely sober during COVID, but I saw 2 people kill themselves that I knew. And it was something that I think a lot of people aren't even over yet or processing.
Yeah.
It was something like 44 of the 49 democracies voted the party out of power that was in power during COVID, because everyone was so depressed. I myself, don't think Joe Biden did that bad of a job considering what he was given. I think he did an amazing job. And we won't get political here, but I think a lot of people were really angry just because of COVID.
Yeah.
And that when people have to isolate, as you said in the beginning, we are social creatures. We get an amazing amount of sense of self on how we fit into the world, how we fit into this world, and what we think other people think of us.
Yeah.
And that was the most amazing thing that I realized in silent meditation that I point out in this book, is where my mind always went when I first started to meditate 9 years ago. My mind was always going to what I thought other people were thinking of me. And then I was like, oh my God, I can't even prove other people have minds, let alone what they're thinking. Why am I always going there? And that is why my mantra in silent meditation is who cares?
Yeah.
And it's something I say in my mind throughout the day with all my ridiculous thoughts. Because your reality is nothing but what you perceive, and your mind's nothing but imagination.
Absolutely.
In my chapter on depression, I talk about Hamlet, actually. And there's a historical question about Hamlet. Is he crazy? Well, he sees a ghost, and he wants to kill his uncle. How do we know that ghost isn't a hallucination? His father's ghost. Something that is said in Hamlet is, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yeah.
And then he says, to me, it is a prison. So, his whole mind state is just his thinking. And that's something on Vedanta as well, which is the type of Hinduism I got into, is that, it's just, your mind is nothing but imagination. The whole empirical world is more of an illusion than it is physical or real. There's paradoxes everywhere.
Yeah.
And what we perceive to be true is not always what is true. We perceive less than 1% of what's around us. And when it comes to things like the gender gap in the last election, you see a lot of men having a problem with such things as female equality and such things as, homosexual equality, treating trans people or gay people as equals. And I think if we survive as a human race, it'll only be through female equality, because that's the only real way to bring global populations down naturally without such issues we had in the one-child nation policy of China, where if women were being born, they'd basically be killed by the father because they wanted to pass on the male name. But you see in the Western countries where women are getting more rights, it is causing populations to go down naturally. And, we hit 8 billion people even with COVID. Mother Nature gave us COVID for one reason. There's too many people on the planet, and with such things as global warming come the rise of viruses. So I see another pandemic on the way, actually. We had monkeypox spreading out of, the tropical areas, and bird flu, will it mutate into something that can transmit to humans? It's nothing the government's really even acknowledging, but I guess that's another topic.
Yeah.
But with that, with that isolation comes this and these things of their manhood being challenged. I would argue and people still believe in race, genetically, biologically, behaviorally speaking, there is no such thing. You tell that to a lot of people, they get offended if they are either African or white or Asian. It's how we identify. And so much of what we do in our lives is all about who I am and how I identify. 99.9% of all human DNA is identical. Genetically, biologically, behaviorally speaking, there is no such thing as race. Biological anthropologists proved that wrong years ago. Gender equality and the, realizing that, this kind of crazy Tucker Carlson great replacement theory that, that they're going to be wiped off the planet by all these people that aren't like them, challenges their sense of self. And they also, men, their brains develop later than women. And so they have a harder time going to college at the age of 18. Women are actually better at college at a younger age than men are. It took me till I was 28 to learn how to read. And that was only through a program called Ledmut Bell, which I talk about in this book. And I'm a firm believer in neuroplasticity.
We are going to talk about that a little bit later. I also want to talk to you about white men committing suicide at a rate of 68%. What do you think is going on in that space? Because that's something we're not talking about in our society today. And also one of those things that they're using to kill themselves is a handgun.
Yes.
Right?
I would argue men are much more aggressive as well than women. Not that they experience depression more. Women can get that from all kinds of ways, like PMDD or just, your hormones, stuff like that. Women, I would argue, deal with a lot more emotional issues than men do, but they're not as aggressive about it. Their men are with the way, we are biologically and trained to be. We're meant to be, much more aggressive than the average female. And one of those is just getting a gun and shooting themselves. That's something my brother did. He had the worst case of paranoid schizophrenia I ever met. He thought that all the carbon monoxide in the air was making him hallucinate. So when he ever went around a car, went downtown, he had to wear a big gas mask. And the medications they put him on, he was an amazing artist. But it was like the movie In a Beautiful Mind. Don't know if you saw that movie. But it's a true story about John Nash. And it's something I talk about in this book as well, in my chapter on psychosis. Is they put him on the dopamine blockers, which are meant to retard thoughts and suppress such chemicals as dopamine, which is a chemical for thinking, and it killed all his artistic ability.
Yeah.
So he couldn't draw and he couldn't paint, and he was miserable, and he shot himself.
So I still don't get, why is it white men committing so much, at such high rate,
I'm saying they're feeling threatened right now.
So
in
you
America.
think white men in America are feeling threatened?
By both gender equality and racial equality. And I see things as though, that's why Trump had Hulk Hogan, at his rallies, ripping off his shirt. If you saw, Trump won the uneducated male vote by somewhere around 16%, and the gender gap was even larger when it came to women. But the whole point is that men's brains develop slower, and we're getting into a point of chronic technology where things are developing faster and faster and faster, and we need to learn to adapt faster and faster and faster to keep up with technology. As I said, women are better, and all that makes them reflect on themselves, say, I'm not worthy. I can't get a good job just by, working in a factory anymore. Those factory jobs are gone. I would argue that's a big part of depression in America, that such things as it's required to get an education to get a decent job. That is nothing that happened in the 50s and 60s. You could go straight from high school to get a good job and support your family and your kids. With the transition of such things as equality, I would argue that really does affect the psyche of the men. They are no longer just the breadwinners, and women don't want to stay at home and have baby after baby after baby anymore. They want to be able to live their lives and have a good job or be a productive member of society themselves. Or even like Kamala Harris, run for president of the United States,
Yeah. For me right here, I think this is a moment where I would like to pause and speak directly to the American people, us in our society right now. I think this is a moment where we have to look at the statistics and see that a lot of our men, not just white, not just black, but men in our society right now are struggling, right? Mentally, emotionally, maybe psychologically, maybe even spiritually as well. We got to focus on, instead of worrying about what people have going on in their private life with social media hyping certain type of cases out there. I really don't want to get into that because I have a really strong opinion with a lot of things that are going on in society. But I think that this is a moment where we have to hone in into caring for our mental health more and supporting the men that are in our society, and also giving space to men to be able to flourish as well in society. Even though we continue to ask for women equality, I also think that we also need to create space for men as well to be able to flourish in society, because we need both, and with the rate of men dying 3 times more than women by suicide, I think this is a big crisis in America. And this is something that America's Congress need to be talking about. This is what politicians need to be talking about. This is what circles and societies we need to be talking about and focusing on, because our young boys are going to become men one day. And if we do not nip this crisis in this moment, it's only going to continue to grow, So we're going to move back into our topic here.
I just want to say one thing, that if you talk about the 2022 statistics, that is a huge spike, and the spike comes with COVID as well as technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue technology is one of the bigger causes as well.
Yeah.
The isolation that everybody's just being on their phone everywhere they go, even on the bus, and ignoring the world around them. These things stimulate the same parts of the brain as drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm. I
so
agree.
does Facebook. It's like you get a like on a Facebook, it triggers dopamine, and you want more like. I just had a friend text me the other day, I need to get off Facebook. I need to cancel my Facebook account. I've met lots of people that can't be on Facebook anymore because it does nothing but make you feel worthless, because everyone's posting all these wonderful things and you feel like, oh, my life's not like that. Mm-hmm. And they think Facebook is reality. Facebook has nothing to do with reality. The only thing someone is posting on Facebook is something that they want you to like, so they get a pleasure center in their brain. And that's what we do. We just want to feel good. All life wants to feel good. And, as I said, we're nothing but rational animals that seek pleasure, avoid pain, and we don't pay attention to 90% of what we think. The Buddha said quite well, suffering is pervasive. Selfish desires are the main cause of the suffering. We all want to feel good, and we chase those good feelings to the point of insanity and such things as suicide, If we don't feel good, we take it out on the world around us or ourselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you as well in that space. Moving on to our next topic here, which is we're going to talk about panic attack, right? You have experienced panic attack a good handful for yourself. Yes. What are panic attacks like? And would you consider them the worst type of mental illness that you have experienced in your lifetime?
A panic attack was really one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I've also had severe mania, which is different, but kind of, masks it. And I've been psychotic as well. Mm-hmm. But really, there was nothing like a panic attack. My heart was thumping. My face was electric. My hands were shaking. And it's like, I thought I was having a heart attack. Mm-hmm. I thought the world's coming to an end. I just don't know why or how, and I'm going to die or something. And I would call 911. The ambulance would come, and they're like, your heart's fine. Mm-hmm. Everything's fine. You're just freaking out. And it happened a couple times. And one of my bigger issues with organic brain disorder is most medications don't work for me. And most medications, I would argue, they give for anxiety are not very good unless you want to be an addict. Things like Valium and Ativan and Klonopin, Versed. Those are medications I only recommend in limited circumstances because they are so addictive, and they can cause even more problems if you get addicted to it. But those medications did nothing for me, as I swallowed 30 Klonopin one time to try and kill myself, and I walked around like it was nothing. A lot of medications, because of my organic brain disorder, just don't even work. And that is one of the issues I've had that I talk about in this book, is, The Shadowed Soul, is how most medications, and I've been on basically every psych med at one time or another, maybe except for some of the more recent ones. That's when I was on SSDI, and I'm no longer on SSDI today.
Yeah.
But the panic attack was just amazing, and I had to deal with them over and over and over. I did find beta blockers and heart medications that were able to work for them, and they helped a lot because, you feel anxiety, you feel it in your chest. It's all connected. All your nerves are connected, and they do give things like propranolol or clonidine, not Klonopin, but clonidine, for anxiety. Those are both heart medications, and I would recommend those. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not giving medical advice. But I would recommend those for people if they way before they try something like Valium or Ativan, because those benzodiazepines are some of the most addictive drugs in the world, and they will lead to addiction, especially if you have chronic anxiety over and over.
Yeah. For someone that is experiencing anxiety in this moment, apart from taking medication, did you do anything else?
I meditated my way off all my anxiety meds. I've meditated my way off a lot of medications. I have overcome my ADHD through the way I meditate, and it's through Chautaka, single-pointed concentration meditation. I rerouted the neural pathways in my brain through mental exercises, and that's what this book, The Shadowed Soul, is about, is overcoming mental illness through Jnana Yoga and the neuroplasticity of the human brain. My brain has 8 different brain states, they said at UCSF with a neurological evaluation I had. And I talk about it in The Power of an Action, My Theory of the Mind. And my brain is constantly jumping in between these 8 different brain states. I would argue those are quite related to my different disorders. And they said my IQ would be impossible to test because I have so much executive dysfunction.
Yeah.
But the most amazing thing is I noticed when I was having anxiety is that my mind would always follow down this rabbit hole of the world's coming to an end. And with Chautaka, you focus on one thing. The only thing I truly know is what I focus on. I am.
Yeah.
Everything else is inference suspected out. I've heard and seen things that aren't there. You ever see a crazy person walking down the street talking to themselves? How does any of us know that's not us? That's something I talk about in this book on my chapter on psychosis. The only thing I take is apodictic, which is a philosophical term for absolute certainty, is something like I think, therefore I am, as Descartes says. Nisargadatta Maharaj would say, who is a Vedantin, who was a modern Vedantin, who was kind of like a Buddha in the Himalayas. In the book I Am That, as every taste of salt pervades the great ocean, and every drop of seawater carries the same flavor, so every experience gives me the touch of reality, the ever-fresh realization of my own being. Every experience validates one thing, that I am conscious. So it's not necessarily I think, therefore I am in Vedanta, but as I experience, therefore I am. And one of the things, the only thing I focus on is I am. And sometimes I switch it up to I am nothing. I am nothing. Not nothing is in nothing, but nothing is in no thing. And, in Vedanta, Brahman is everything, and Brahman is God. And you are nothing but that consciousness. Yeah. It's when we identify as our bodies and our minds that all our problems arise. And one of the things I did, and I still do when I have an anxiety attack, is I just breathe and I shift the focus. I don't go down the rabbit hole. It was amazing to realize that I could do that with Chautaka, because every day for 45 minutes, without exception, and if I miss a day, then I do twice that the next day. Actually, a couple times I've fallen asleep or something because I do death pose. I don't fall asleep that easily because my brain naturally overproduces dopamine, which is a cause for anxiety. That's one of the issues with schizophrenia is the frontal lobes of the brain overproduce dopamine, and I have a nerve in my frontal lobe that is pumping dopamine into my brain. But the most amazing thing is to realize that I don't need to go down the rabbit hole of chaos. I was able to pause, breathe, shift my focus just on the words I am, and it dissolved. It's only been through years of exercise too, so I don't suggest doing it. I mean, you have to do this daily. Meditation is a daily mental exercise.
Yeah.
And that's what most of what we do is nothing but repetitious behavior. Yeah. That's why the whole world relates to that Einsteinian quote. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We all do the same thing over and over. We have the same jobs. We have the same schedule. 9 to 5, you get your coffee at a certain time in the morning. I hop on the bus every weekday at 8 o'clock, and it takes me straight to work, and I get there at about 8:25. I get off at around 4:15, and then I do different routines at different days of the week.
Yeah.
Most of what we do is nothing but repetitious behavior.
Yeah.
So what neuroplasticity is about is rewiring your brain to behave differently in different, developing your brain to behave differently in different circumstances or in the same circumstance, so you don't go to that level of insanity.
Yeah. Talking about neuroplasticity, for someone else that haven't come across this terminology before, what is neuroplasticity?
Well, this empirical world, or the Maya, as it says in the Vedic concept, is constantly changing. The only thing that remains constant is change. That is one of the universal laws of both Western science and the Vedic scriptures. The only thing that remains constant is change, but your brain's meant to adapt to that shift. One of the issues we're having with technology is how fast technology is changing.
Yeah.
Will technology change to a point where we can't adapt and keep up with it because it's changing faster than we can adapt? But no one's born with an IQ. This empirical world's constantly shifting. Your brain's meant to adapt to that shift. You can do things to develop your brain. I had my savant skills were gone when I first, got sober because, drugs and epilepsy don't go well together, especially speed. And I did a lot of speed.
Mm.
I had a lot of seizures, and I did have some brain damage. I developed dyscalculia because of that, which is dyslexia with numbers.
Yeah.
I never had that before. But one of the things I did is I tried to memorize everything I could, and I rebuilt my memory in all kinds of ways. I'm getting better at names now. I was terrible at names. I never paid attention to names my whole life. Something I'm working on recently is just trying to learn everybody's name. You can quiz yourself. You can use technology to make you smarter. If you play memory games on your phone, quiz yourself on just trying to memorize passages from books. You can develop your memory in all kinds of ways. One of the issues they have with seniors and dementia is complacency. You get old, you get tired, you don't want to exercise, and your mind slowly kind of, dementia is a big part of it is complacency. It's why they have a lot of patterns and, geometrical shapes in, nursing homes with people that have like Alzheimer's and stuff like that, because the less you use your mind, the less it functions, you know. And the point of this book is you're not born with an IQ. You can develop your mind in both social, emotional, and intellectual ways. You can use technology to make you smarter. But one of the issues they're having with young boys, especially in school right now, is if you use AI to write a paper, you're not going to know how to write a paper, And that's one thing that AI can do for a lot of people is just write their essay for them. You need to teach your brain how to write the essay, and you have to have the motivation. I have these perfect Platonic forms that I head towards, and I have the acceptance that I will always fall short.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes down to developing the brain, cognitive therapy.
Yeah.
How does
cognitive behavioral therapy?
Yes, cognitive behavioral therapy. How does that support one with depression and anxiety, staying on topic?
What any 12-step program is. I mean, I've gone to 12-step programs for a very long time now, and a lot of them say, "Oh, I don't know how it works; it just works." And if you want to know the scientific terms for any 12-step program, be it AA, CMA, SLA, whatever it is, Al-Anon, it's you're changing your brain chemistry through changing your behavior and your actions.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay, I won't indulge in this, obsession anymore, and I'm going to do positive, constructive things to change my reality. It's scientifically proven that people who believe in God are usually happier people. I have found a God to believe in, and I have found a God that I can prove, which is nothing but consciousness. Every experience validates one thing, that I'm a conscious being. I hated God for years because of the school I was locked up to in Provo, Utah. I was surrounded by fundamentalists that were punishing me and that I was standing up to. And then they'd say, that's a demerit. One demerit was 25 minutes standing up against a wall. You start over. I'd tell them where to go and how to get there and say, give me another demerit. And, but they'd also try and convert us on the weekends. And so I hated God for years. But I also found another provable definition of God that I talk about in this book, which is just the words, I don't know. I don't know can honestly answer every question except for I am. And God has all the answers. So if you are able to have an open mind and just realize, as Socrates says, the only thing I know is that I know nothing, you can always grow and learn in your life. And it's about developing your brain at every stage of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as we come close to this conversation, what solution do you suggest for depression alongside with people seeking medical help and also anxiety as well?
I use both meditation for my depression and my anxiety. I'm no longer suicidally depressed. I'm not on antidepressants, never worked for me anyways. But one of the things I do is if I have a bad thought, I automatically replace it with a good one. I just replace it with the words, I love you. I still have suicidal thoughts at times. Sometimes my mind goes, oh God, I want to die. Just because it's where my mind goes.
Mm-hmm.
But then I shift it and I notice it. I just replace it. All emotions and thoughts are just waves. That's how the universe functions. A desire is a wave, nothing more. If it's a good desire, it's a bad desire. Everything passes. This too shall pass. And that's one of the reasons I say, who cares to every thought for 45 minutes. It's a mental exercise. It's just let it go, let it go, let it go. Suffering is the price we pay for not letting go. Everything is temporary.
Yeah.
So if you try and hold on to things, or I have a friend who's gotten older and he's really angry that everybody in his life has died. Well, a lot of 12-step programs say such things as acceptance. Well, acceptance can sound so harsh. Why don't you just try letting it go? Just, who cares? It's only important if your mind tells you it is. And your mind is nothing but imagination anyways. The brain processes 6 billion pieces of information a second. It filters most of that out. You only perceive about 2,000 of those.
Mm-hmm.
So, how could our minds be anything but imagination? If you try and take a drug like LSD, is what that does is it removes the barriers of all the filters and overloads your system with information so you can't process it. And you see all these crazy things that don't exist. We couldn't function in a world where we were able to get all that information, so we're in a very limited subjective relative perspective. None of us know much, and every time we get an answer, we just get more questions. And one of the things that has been the most amazing thing to me is just to realize I am not my mind. I am not my body. I am just that consciousness. I am the Atman. And the Atman and the Brahman are one, as it says in the Vedic scriptures. The true self itself is that pure consciousness, that which nothing can be known in any way. And the same true self, pure consciousness, is not different from the ultimate principle, Brahman. Brahman is the only reality, since it is untinged by difference, the mark of ignorance, and the one thing that cannot be improved upon. You are perfect. You are that perfect consciousness. It's when you identify as your body and your mind that all your problems arise. So just let it go. Who cares?
Thank you for that. Thank you guys so much for joining us on Self-Reflection Podcast today. I hope that this conversation brought some type of light to someone that is listening to this conversation. If it's you, I hope it allows you to feel, seen in this moment if you are struggling with anxiety and depression. Also, Justin, if someone wants to get your books, where would you suggest?
You can go to justinwitteblog.com, and this book's basically for free along with the other chapters. They're both on Amazon. The other one's A Vicious Cycle. Just realize that A Vicious Cycle is a pretty crazy book. So if you get offended easily, don't read it. Let's just say I've had doctors and psychiatrists ask me how I think of the insults that I think of. And the whole point of this book is that I'm not that way anymore. But every insult in this book I said to someone, and it was a true story. I talk about my father in both books, but one of the things I talk about in both books too is God is everything and everything is love. The root cause of all actions is love.
Yeah.
What is fear but the urge to protect? There are those who love Israel and those who love Palestine. How it manifests is nothing but fear and anger. One is scared they will lose something. The other is scared they'll fail to get it back. To me, everything is love. Our problem is our understanding, and our problem is our ignorance. And I talk about that in both books.
Thank you. I love that. And just to close out this conversation with the statistics that we had today, I think based on my experience as a person and from what I know, I I think that when it comes down to finding yourself, finding happiness, especially as a man, I think you kind of talked about like, so many people are on their phone and don't really have, something like you didn't use this word purpose, but they don't have a purpose. They don't have something to look forward to. So, from what I can suggest in this space is, if you're someone that don't feel like you have quote unquote a purpose for your life, I think what has worked for me is creating a plan, right? Finding something that you are passionate about, and focusing on that, and allowing yourself to just merge into that, and let it be something that comes to you naturally, right? Something that you feel like you can do every single day, even if you're not getting paid on that. Because I think Jordan Peterson is one of those people that also talk about this. Like, he had this program where he put men into a group, and they came in, they had a bunch of men come into a group, and what they did was they gave men a plan, like, okay, let's map out your life, and in this moment, and they found out that majority of the men that were in that group end up becoming really successful in life. Their depression went away, their anxiety went away, right? They end up having purpose for life, and they end up feeling as if they belong here. They felt as if, they have something to live for, right? So if you are listening to this conversation and you're feeling depressed, you're feeling lost, you're feeling like you don't know what you want out of life, or you don't know what you're doing in life, create a moment for self-reflection and find something that speaks to you in your soul, and create a plan to live on that. And, and I understand that it's not easy. Like, someone could sit here and say, oh, Lyra, you just saying that. No, I understand it's not easy, right? Because you have to motivate yourself. You have to push yourself. You have to be inspired by yourself at times, right? I understand that sometimes you're not going to feel like doing it, but having a plan where you see that there's an outcome at the end of that plan, it's going to allow you to motivate yourself even when you don't have motivation as well.
Really quickly, you're talking about purpose. Point of this book is purpose. And intelligent behavior is purposeful behavior, and you can't have purpose without God. That's something St. Augustine says. The law of karma and the theory of evolution tell you the same thing. The only thing remains constant is change. And I either learn or I suffer. I adapt or I die. The purpose of life is to learn.
Yeah.
That's what purpose of all life. Be it a blade of grass growing towards the sunlight. It knows how to grow towards, the sun, the vitamin D in the sunlight. All life, and the purpose of all life is to learn. That's what I'm here for, is to grow and learn to be a better person.
I agree.
So, yeah.
Thank you guys again so much for joining us on Self-Reflection Podcast. In this moment, I want to remind you, if you have yet to subscribe to Self-Reflection Podcast, please go ahead and hit that subscription button. I truly appreciate it as we seek to continue to grow our community here on Self-Reflection Podcast. Also, follow me on my social media at Lira, LIRA_NDIFON. On my social media, I somewhat post motivational quotes, motivational videos, inspiring videos about self-reflection and how to support your mental health daily. So go ahead and follow me on my social media. Again, it's Lira, LIRA_NDIFON. And the last thing, please send us your comments, send us your feedback, send us a topic that you would like us to talk about on Self-Reflection Podcast. The goal here is to be able to have an interactive conversation with you guys as well out there. So I would love to hear your feedback. Thank you guys again so much for listening to Self-Reflection Podcast. I hope you guys have a blessed day. Take care of yourself, love yourself, be kind, and be gentle with yourself. Until next time, you're listening to Self-Reflection Podcast, and this is your girl, Lyra. Ta-da!